Hello everyone and welcome to the Autism Science Foundation Science Roundup. My name is Alicia Halliday and I'm the new Chief Science Officer here at ASF. I'm very proud to be here and excited to be talking with you today. Here's a look at some of the things that happened in autism and autism research during my first week. On Wednesday night of this week, a new documentary about the vaccine debate was shown on PBS. Titled Vaccines Calling the Shots, it examined the science behind vaccinations, the return of preventable diseases, and the risks of opting out of vaccination. ASF President Allison Singer and board member Paul Offit are featured in the story, and the program has received rave reviews from critics. If you missed it, the documentary can now be seen in its entirety on the PBS website, along with some valuable information and explanations of the science. You can also find a link to the PBS site on the ASF homepage. Also this week, 2 new studies came out on intervention in infants. Why is yet another study on early intervention important? Well, the studies that have been done so far have looked at toddlers, not infants, aging from about 18 months and older. But some parents notice symptoms even earlier. Also, research experts have been able to identify risk markers as early as 6 months. So obviously, there's a strong need to examine interventions in infancy. 2 groups coincidentally published their findings in the same week, and they are hopefully the first in a series of research investigations on autism intervention in infancy. In the first study, conducted at the Mind Institute at UC Davis, 7 families with children who showed early signs and symptoms of ASD were followed through an intervention that focused on speech, social attention, and communication. The clinicians trained parents or caregivers to do the intervention at home. This sounds like it's easy, but it's really not as simple as it seems. As a result, the children receiving an intervention had less severe autism symptoms than those who did not receive the intervention. The second study was one that was partially funded by ASF to Klaus Libertas at the University of Pittsburgh. They recruited 3-month-old infants and trained parents to deliver an intervention designed to improve grasping and reaching behavior. This was a really cool study design that involved putting Velcro on objects and then giving the infants mittens with the other side of the Velcro so that if they swatted at an item, they could pick it up and bring it to their mouths. We've been calling this project the Sticky Mitten Study. The goal was to see if they could bring grasping and mouth exploration on early by using the sticky mittens and whether or not that would stimulate earlier brain development in other areas. So in this study, both high-risk infants and those without a family history were given the intervention. As expected, everyone who received the intervention did better on motor skills after a few weeks. However, those with a high risk of autism didn't show as much improvement in a face preference task than those with a low risk of autism, although there still was some improvement. This is good news because there was some improvement, but bad news because it didn't reach statistical significance. What's also interesting about both of these studies is that the researchers trained parents to deliver the intervention. This makes sense since parents or caretakers are the ones with the baby more often than a clinician can be. Clinicians spend years training on how to effectively deliver interventions, and they're not easy. So figuring out a way for parents to do them is a big deal. The parents not only learned it, but they actually liked it. I can remember when my daughters were infants, it was a huge accomplishment just to shorten the ever-mounding pile of laundry. So finding ways to incorporate an intervention into daily routines is a huge step. While neither study was conclusive, they both show promise for intervention in infancy and lay the groundwork for more definitive studies. It's also important to remember that when thinking about early signs and symptoms of autism, some require very sophisticated expertise to find. So determining risk at or before 1 year, if you don't have a family history, can be at the best difficult and at the worst almost impossible. That makes it even more important that the interventions be able to be done by parents or caregivers at home so that they can be shared and learned, and also that it's not overburdening for the families. This way, each parent has the same opportunity, not just those children who are identified by 6 months. Continuing this segment on new findings, also published this week was a new study on the topic that always is on people's minds, changes in the prevalence of autism. This week, a group of researchers conducted a new analysis on data that's already out there on autism prevalence. They were actually first studying the burden of disease, but they needed an accurate prevalence estimate across time to be able to calculate this. They concluded that based on the correction for different methods, autism prevalence has not really changed over the past 20 years. So when I say different methods, I'm talking about different epidemiology studies using different ways to find the numbers. So some researchers go back through the registries that exist. Others, like the CDC, look through education records. And some of them can even do a direct assessment. This study sheds light on ongoing debates over whether there actually has been a change over time. But just a note, regardless of the changes in prevalence over time, the calculated burden is still very high and data from developing countries is low. This is clearly not the final answer on the question, but an interesting publication. Thank you for joining today. You can learn more about This Week in Autism by visiting the ASF website at autismsciencefoundation.org or by liking us on Facebook. Also, be sure to keep an eye out on the ASF blog early next week because Dr. Libertas is going to be writing a blog about that sticky mitten study. Talk to you soon.